Tonight we have a very special guest, a man who has written over 30 books, who's an internationally known figure as an author, lecturer, philosopher, a stand-up comedian, a sit-down comedian, stand-up philosopher, you name it, Mr. Robert Anton Wilson. Bob, thanks very much for being here tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Good. Now, your latest book is entitled "Everything is Under Control." It's a conspiracy encyclopedia. Is that correct?
Well, it's not exactly an encyclopedia. It's more a chrestomathy. If we did an encyclopedia of all the conspiracy theories around in this country today, it would be at least as long as the Britannica, 22 volumes minimum. This is a chrestomathy. It's some of the wilder and weirder conspiracy. It does cover a lot, though, I must say, as much as one book can.
How did you choose from among the millions of conspiracy theories that are current these days? How did you choose which ones to include in the encyclopedia?
Well, there were a couple of criteria. I wanted to put in the weirdest, craziest, goofiest ones, and I also wanted to put in the most plausible ones, so that the reader would be constantly alternating between laughing out loud at this nonsense and wondering, hey, some of this might be true, which is the ideal state for a reader to be in, I think.
Never knowing whether it's truth or fiction, factor or factor reality. Well, again, conspiracy is an extremely hot topic these days. Conspiracy theories abound. The X-Files is extremely popular on television. But I know that you've been following conspiracy theories for most of your career, including as far back as 25 years ago with the Illuminatus trilogy that you co-authored with Bob Shea. What got you involved in the interest in conspiracy theories in the first place?
Well, actually, that gets into the new book, too, how it all started. It started with a fellow I used to know named Kerry Thornley, who was one of the co-creators of the only religion I've ever been able to really enjoy, the Discordian religion, which is based on worship of Eris, the goddess of chaos, confusion, discord, bureaucracy, and international relations, the 5 levels of chaos in the world. And, you know, the argument for the existence of Eris is very simple. If Eris doesn't exist, who put all this chaos here? Nobody can answer. Anyway, Kerry got indicted by Jim Garrison as one of the Kennedy assassination team. And Kerry thought at the time, and all of us who knew him thought, that Garrison was just off his head or an unscrupulous demagogue. And then, to our great astonishment, a couple of years later, Kerry announced that he thought it was true, that while he was in the Marines, he thinks he remembers that he volunteered for an experiment, and he thinks they gave him drugs and brainwashed him and turned him into a zombie like the Manchurian Candidate. So he was part of the Kennedy assassination, but he didn't know it. Only he has some memories come back now and then.
Was he one of the fake Oswalds that were?
That was one theory. That was one of the theories Garrison promoted. Kerry met a guy in a bar in New Orleans who he thinks was E. Howard Hunt, who told him he was writing a book called Hitler Was a Good Guy. He doesn't remember anything else of that conversation. He met David Ferry once, another of the leading suspect. He doesn't remember that conversation. He was living 2 blocks from Oswald, whom he knew in the Marines, and he never met him. All those months they were living 2 blocks apart. So Kerry thinks his memory has been tampered with. And at one point he thought I was his CIA babysitter. Then you're really involved in conspiracy theory when you got a friend who's accused of being an assassin, and he's accusing you of being the CIA mastermind. So you can't ignore the subject after that. That's how I came to write Illuminatus, and after that I can never completely, although I've written on dozens of other subjects, and I hate to be identified with conspiracy theory because I have so many other things that I think are more important that I've written about. But I can't leave it alone entirely because every week in the mail I get tons of stuff by people who've read Illuminatus and want me to be informed about the latest conspiracy that they've just discovered. So I can't get out of the conspiracy field entirely.
Well, what is it about the human psyche that seems to be drawn towards these conspiracy theories? Is it some love of the unknown, or some idea that there may be forces out there that are controlling our destiny? Or
well, I think there are 3 factors. A, nobody likes to take the blame for their own problems, so they look for somebody else to blame. And if you can find a big enough group, you've explained everything in your life that doesn't work.
That's the parental conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it's not your fault. It's the fault. If it's not your fault or your parents, it's the Jesuits, the Freemasons, the Jews, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, you got a lot of wide choice to pick who to blame.
Rich white man?
Yeah, as long as you don't have to blame yourself. That's one motive. And another motive is that we are living in very weird times. The world is changing faster and faster, which I think is due to the acceleration of information flow in the modern world. Information is increasing, and the transmission of information is going faster and faster due to internet and the whole computer revolution, which means that most people are living in a world they can't understand. And when people can't understand something, they tend to go for sinister explanations of it. Somebody is manipulating things in a way I don't like. That's the way people feel when things change too fast and they can't understand it. And the third reason is, of course, that there are lots of conspiracies around. You're supposed to be a nut if you think about conspiracies, unless you're a district attorney. Then you can bring in 20 people into the court and charge them under the RICO law with conspiracy, even if they never met one another. And, I mean, the government does recognize conspiracies. Every government does. There are laws against conspiracy. And conspiracies do exist. The question is, do any really big ones exist, such as the ones imagined in the more extravagant conspiracy theories?
Now, it's interesting that you should bring up that this may be a modern phenomena, because if you go back through history, as you do in the encyclopedia, there have always been conspiracy theories. Was it Ishmael Reed, the novelist, who said the history of the world is the history of the war between secret societies?
Yes, I like that quote quite a bit because there's a certain element of truth in it, but it's just bizarre enough to make people sit up and say, what? You know, actually, there's this parallel between the present condition and the condition around the year 1000.
Or the other millennium madness.
Yeah, most people think the Christian calendar is the true calendar. I spent the whole year dating all my letters with 11 different dates, just to remind all my correspondents that there's more than one calendar. The millennium is like 600 years away in the Discordian calendar, and it's about 900 years away in the Mayan calendar.
And they've already had 7 millennium changes in the Chinese calendar, I think.
Yes,
so,
and but most people are thinking in terms of the generally accepted calendar, which happens to be a Christian calendar, which is kind of odd since this is not a Christian country.
Well, let's go into that. You've mentioned this before, and I'm fascinated by your theory. It makes more sense than any other political theory I've heard ever. Let's go into this a little. What do you mean, sir, that this is not a Christian country?
Well, for instance, the Constitution never mentions God or Jesus or the Christian religion. It grants absolute freedom for anybody to pick whatever religion they want.
Mentions nature and nature's God.
That's in the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, okay, all right.
And nature's God was a term used by the philosophers of the 18th century to signify an abstract deity who created the world, but has nothing in common with the Christian God, the Jewish God, the Muslim God, the Hindu gods, or any other religious figure. This was a philosophical concept that Jefferson invoked, not a deity that people tried to bribe and get favors from. The deists, who were the dominant party behind our Constitution, the deists believed there was a God, but God did not do favors and could not be bribed, which knocks the bottom out of all organized religion, because all organized religion consists of techniques of how to bribe, cajole, or otherwise get favors out of the deity.
Sounds like Jim Morrison's line, you cannot petition the Lord with a prayer. So.
Well, that's exactly what all the founding fathers thought. I forgot what I was going to add to that, so ask another question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have interrupted you. This is not a Christian country, and I know you had more...
George Washington, for instance, never used the word God in any of his public speeches or any of his private writings. He did use the word providence, which is a concept that deists share with the Orthodox. But when Washington used the word providence, if he had to use a pronoun afterwards, he always varied between he, she, and it. Just to show that he didn't believe in any anthropomorphic. The idea of a God with a penis has always seemed hilarious to me. And now that the feminists are trying to offering us a God with a vagina, that seems equally ridiculous. I'm more inclined to the it school of thought. Any cosmic mind has got to be an it. I can't imagine it being a sexual creature. Well, if God is sexual, what kind of sex life does God have?
Pretty barren, I would imagine, if there's no goddess. around to take care of him. Now, let's backtrack for just a second. If this is not a Christian country, we can kind of indicate that the founders of the country were all Masons. So this is more a Masonic country?
Most of them were Masons, yeah. Well, the Constitution has a lot in common with the rules of a Masonic lodge, actually.
And doesn't that get right back to the conspiracy theory of a secret society?
A lot of right-wingers think we have been run by a Masonic conspiracy. One of the theories I trace through this whole book, and has many variations, the theory that the French Revolution was a Masonic conspiracy. Mm-hmm. There are various Masonic lodges that are blamed by different conspiracy theorists. Some think it's Masonry in general. Some think it's just the Grand Orient Lodge of Egyptian Freemasonry. Some want to blame the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland. It depends on where you look at, what part of the political spectrum you're looking from, which Masons you're most afraid of. I got a lot of friends who are Masons, so I'm not afraid of any of them.
Well, you don't seem to be afraid of much of anything. For a person who's an expert in conspiracies, you're probably the least paranoid person I've ever met. You have all the data, but none of the fear that most everybody else who's involved in conspiracy theories.
Well, my belief is I don't believe in one big conspiracy that runs everything. That seems absurd to me, and there's so much evidence against it. I have more sympathy for theories like Carl Oglesby's Yankee and Cowboy War, where the ruling class is split and at war with itself, or the A. Albionic theory, where the British royal family and the Vatican have been fighting for 300 years, and everything else is the result of the two major conspiracies of the British royal family and the Vatican. But even that seems oversimplified. I prefer to think there's, at minimum, at any given time, there's about 24 conspiracies afoot. Carl Oglesby, the historian, once said, "A multitude of conspiracies contend in the night." And as far as I have been able to discover in all my years of being involved in, more or less unwillingly in this field, I cannot find any proof of any conspiracy that really existed, was really brought into court and convicted, that lasted more than 10 years before everybody double-crossed everybody else and the conspiracy fell apart.
It's more of a conspiracy of stupidity, it seems like, is running the planet.
I think that is the strongest conspiracy on the planet, is the conspiracy of the stupid.
Yeah.
To prevent schools from educating their children, because they want their children to be as dumb as they are, to prevent television from putting anything intelligent on as much as possible. To keep
with the exception of this half hour, of course.
Well, of course, yes. Present company excluded.
Well, you're half right. But, but now, are there since you've done massive research on the numerous conspiracy theories, are there certain hallmarks of a good conspiracy? Are there certain things that the best conspiracies have in common, like shadowy historical roots, or conspiracy to control one particular aspect of life or the mind?
What I have noticed, it's hard to pick a favorite. It depends on whether you want the craziest one or the most plausible.
I'm just wondering if they have anything in common. Something.
Well, yeah. When you get into the more science fiction type conspiracy theories,
the X-Files type.
Yeah, well, there are more X-Files type theories around than they've done on X-Files itself. There are so many conspiracy theories about various aliens meddling with us. This goes back to Charles Fort, who in the 1920s wrote a couple of books on that theme. There's all sorts of ideas about who it is, whether they come from Sirius or Zeta Reticuli, whether they're Greys or some other types,
or all of the above.
And when you get into that literature enough, you find out that it's the most science fiction and futuristic theories are curiously the most medieval. What it comes down to is a battle between good and evil on a cosmological level, with the Earth as just one part of the major. It goes back before Christianity to Zarathustra, who had the Ahriman and Mazda, these two gods who are in perpetual war with each other. And in Christianity, they made the good one God and the bad one the devil. But in Zarathustrianism, you're never quite sure who's the good one or the bad one. You got to make a choice, but you don't know you're choosing correctly. You don't know who's going to win, which I find more interesting.
The conspiracy encyclopedia, is that correct?
Well, it's not exactly an encyclopedia. It's more a chrestomathy. If we did an encyclopedia of all the conspiracy theories around in this country today, it would be at least as long as the Britannica, 22 volumes minimum. This is a chrestomathy. It's some of the wilder and weirder conspiracy. It does cover a lot, though, I must say, as much as one book can.
How did you choose from among the millions of conspiracy theories that are current these days? How did you choose which ones to include in the encyclopedia?
Well, there were a couple of criteria. I wanted to put in the weirdest, craziest, goofiest ones, and I also wanted to put in the most plausible ones, so that the reader would be constantly alternating between laughing out loud at this nonsense and wondering, hey, some of this might be true, which is the ideal state for a reader to be in, I think.
Never knowing whether it's truth or fiction, factor or factor reality. Well, again, conspiracy is an extremely hot topic these days. Conspiracy. Tonight we have a very special guest, a man who has written over 30 books, who's an internationally known figure as an author, lecturer, philosopher, a stand-up comedian, a sit-down comedian, stand-up philosopher, you name it, Mr. Robert Anton Wilson. Bob, thanks very much for being here tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Good. Now, your latest book is entitled Everything is Under Control. It's a conspiracy theories abound. The X-Files is extremely popular on television. But I know that you've been following conspiracy theories for most of your career, including as far back as 25 years ago with the Illuminatus trilogy that you co-authored with Bob Shea. What got you involved in the interest in conspiracy theories in the first place?
Well, actually, that gets into the new book, too, how it all started. It started with a fellow I used to know named Kerry Thornley, who was one of the co-creators of the only religion I've ever been able to really enjoy, the Discordian religion, which is based on worship of Eris, the goddess of chaos, confusion, discord, bureaucracy, and international relations, the 5 levels of chaos in the world. And, you know, the argument for the existence of Eris is very simple. If Eris doesn't exist, who put all this chaos here? Nobody can answer. Anyway, Kerry got